back in 2015, the consortium met, much in a meeting like this, but actually we met in Istanbul. And at the time, we asked our ECPC partners a simple question. We asked them, how could the ECPC support your work in advancing your agenda in peace building and early childhood? And we heard several things, and many of them we have been discussing today. Partners thought that the ECPC could really propel advocacy. We've heard from Rima, from others, and how we've capitalized on the network for that. Many said that they thought this was a perfect space to advise and to work on collaborative and common frameworks for evaluation. We've heard from Queens and others partners on that as well. We heard that this was a perfect place for networking, and this is exactly what we continue to do today. So we're really trying to keep faithful to the promises and the requests of our partners. So today I am here to, if my slides, yes, to tell you about one area that the partners told us they thought the consortium could be really helpful on, and that's information sharing, or sort of the catchy phrase is knowledge brokering, right? So this is a space where there's policymakers, practitioners, scholars, and a space in which we should really get the science out of here. We should really reach across the aisle, not only talk to our own friends in ECD, but really bring the peace-building community here and policymakers to the table. So what this panel wants to do is tell you all how we have approached that objective, some of the accomplishments, some of our visions to continue that, to really get that science out into the front lines, into the hands of policymakers in different contexts. So that's what this short session is about. So I'm going to pass it on to Chelsea, who's going to continue on the discussion, and then we will take it on from there.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm really excited to share with you about the brief and the book that the Early Childhood Peace Consortium sponsored recently. We started off with the brief. So last May, the Early Childhood Peace Consortium sponsored a brief called Contributions of Early Childhood Development Services to Preventing Violent Conflict and Sustaining Peace. And with this brief, we tried to bring together everything that you've heard today from all of the different sectors and disciplines, and combining early childhood knowledge with the knowledge that we've gained from peace-building sector and governments. And what we did in this brief was we broke it down into two sections. The first was, you probably can't see back there, but it's the risks that can result from lack of ECD services. So this has a lot to do with what we heard today about toxic stress and all of the terrible things that can happen in the body and the brain if the child is in an environment that isn't conducive to nurturing care. But we also wanted to show the great benefits of what will happen if we do. And again, this is all about today. This is early childhood development, advancing the culture of peace and advancing peace building. In this 4-page brief, we tried to pack in a lot of evidence, and while we were writing this, we realized, wow, we have so much great things to share, and we want to make sure that it is accessible to a wide audience across many different disciplines. And so this actually led to us creating a full-length concept paper, which sort of evolved into a book, but we just released this a few days ago. It is now available on the website. The website is ecdpeace.org, the Early Childhood Peace Consortium website. And what we wanted to do with this is go really deep into everything that we talked about in the 4-page brief. So each chapter expands on the arguments. So the first chapter will give a introductory explanation to ECD, but also peace building and good governance. And the second chapter will go into the risks, all of the neurobiological evidence, the genetics evidence on why we really need to invest in young children, and the potential societal risks that may occur if we don't. The third chapter goes into the benefits of ECD services, which is the entire basis of this chapter is actually the theory of change that Pia discussed earlier today, and how early childhood services can contribute to factors such as social cohesion, economic productivity, and equality, and how these are crucial for peace building and for reducing risks of violent conflict. The fourth chapter goes into really, really deep into the evidence, into the ECD programming evidence. And in this chapter, you will see summaries of every person that has spoken today, each of their studies. We have from Northern Ireland, from Angie's work, we have a lot of people in there. And finally, we have the policy recommendations. And what we wanted to do with this paper was to make it as understandable and intuitive as possible for a wide audience. We brought together people from all different disciplines and all different levels of knowledge so that it could be understandable for many different people. And the way we did that was trying to link every chapter and every single concept to a clear visual so that we are leading the reader through this paper and trying to make the knowledge as accessible as we can. We also created this iconographic language that we are explaining all of the themes through, and we made an animation to introduce the iconic language to you and also to show the main theme.
Young children are the key building blocks of society. Influences from family, communities, institutions, and the environment shape children into the adults they will become. Adults who will influence their future family, community, institutions, and environment. The way society influences young children can lead to increasing risks of violence, or promoting peace. Harmful influences at different levels can impair child development. Which increases the likelihood of negative outcomes in adulthood. Risks may include poorer health, lower education and economic achievement, and increased risk of engaging in violence and crime. Multi-level ECD services will have the strongest impact on a child's life trajectory. These services promote optimal development of brains and bodies. In turn, the child is more likely to be healthy, educated, employed, and earn higher income, and has a reduced risk in engaging in violence and crime. Multi-level ECD services can also improve the lives of individual caregivers and communities. Multi-level ECD services are crucial for long-term peace and sustainable development. Let's support governments, communities, and families in nurturing young children so that ECD can drive the transformation we hope to achieve. The time is now. To review the evidence supporting the content of this video, go to ecdpeace.org/ECPC background paper and read the Early Childhood Peace Consortium background paper.
As you saw from the animation, this paper and everything that we do at the Early Childhood Peace Consortium revolves around the entire human ecology. You heard everyone talk about today how we can't just think about the child, we have to think about the caregiver, caring for the caregiver, the community, bringing people together around the common goal of child well-being, and of course involving institutions and governments to make sure that ECD policies are incorporated into policymaking around the world. And so with this paper and these visuals with the animation, we really hope that ECD practitioners and researchers will have an easy way to understand the concepts of peace building and make sure that their programs are aligned with peace building efforts, and on the other hand, make sure that peace builders and policymakers, government leaders really understand the gravity of the situation if we don't invest in young children, and also the incredible benefits that can happen if we do. So all of these resources are available on ecdpeace.org, and I encourage you to read them and pass around to your different networks. Now, pass it over to Angie. Great.
Thank you. So, thank you, Chelsea. In the process of putting that concept paper together, a lot of dialogue started. And one of the challenges that we have had is to reach across other disciplines, as I was saying, one of them being the peace-building community. I would say probably most of us here are in the business of childhood and early childhood development, but we need to be able to attract them, the peace-building community per se. So just last month, we released a chapter very much based on a lot of the concepts that Chelsea has described in a book that, again, just came out. It's Developmental Science and Sustainable Development Goals for Children and Youth. The consortium authored a chapter. It's the only chapter in the book that is addressing issues of early childhood and social cohesion. There are two things about this chapter that we believe are important. One is that it is housed, again, in a volume that speaks to the broader developmental scientist community, not just ECD, but youth development, and to the sustainable development community as well. So we need to find places to get our voice in that are not our traditional close friends, but really reach across the aisle, across sectors and across disciplines. The other challenge that this chapter took on is we actually thought, what language does the peace-building community speak and understand? Peace-building community has multiple indices and ways to sort of frame what peace means. One of them is the positive and negative peace. So one of the exercises we did was actually align how does early childhood development, sustainable development, and the peace index as the peace-building community understands it actually come together. That is the hope that we have, is that other disciplines are going to look at it and we start to speak that common language. So I would recommend, this is also going to be on the website, and for those of you who are interested in the book, it'll be in display as well. This is the type of brokering that we're talking about, another sort of way of getting our voice out into other places and other disciplines. Our second, I would say, success story is a bit older. Back in 2012, when the first publications from the consortium came out, one of them being the famous book that I'm sure you all know by now, have seen, Pathways to Peace, as well as an earlier version of the concept note, which was titled The Ecology of Peace, was released sort of internally in our group. What happened back in 2012 is that some colleagues in Colombia, in Bogota, on a private foundation, Saldarriaga Concha, got a hold of the book and got a hold of that concept note. What they did is they were inspired by what was in those chapters, what was in that concept note, and they framed a proposal that they put together and presented to the government of Colombia, specifically to the Child Protection Center, a sector who is in charge of delivering most programs to children under the age of 5 living in high vulnerability. Fast forward 4 years later, what we saw is that the foundation provided a program entitled Program on Resilience and Reconciliation in the Context of ECD and Peace Building that reached over 420 families across 30 municipalities of high levels of internal displacement in Colombia. This, we think, is one of the early examples coming full circle, 2 moments of knowledge brokering that are important. One, how do we get that information that is in books, that is in papers, that is in concept notes, in the right hands at the right time of practitioners and of policymakers, right? And this is what I think these exchanges are really important, right, is to be able to do that. The second piece is what happens next, and that's when the generation of science and evidence allows us to hopefully improve and increase the goal of sustainability. So to talk a little bit about what happens next with our research, how do we get the research out of academic journals, collecting dust in libraries? How do we actually get it out there? I'm going to tell you our last really exciting story that is going to connect me then to my colleague Suna. One of the first randomized trial evaluations that was designed, inspired by the consortium, also started back in about 2013, when ARC, which is the Arab Research Collective, ACEV, the mother-child foundation in Turkey, Yale University got together and said, it was sort of, I would say, the original sort of evaluation framework for ECD and peace building. We designed a trial to test ideas of social cohesion, parental stress, disciplinary styles in context of high vulnerability. We did a randomized control trial of a mother-child education program, which Suna is going to talk about, and we started to test these principles. The interesting thing about this trial is it was conducted among 2 Palestinian refugee camps or settlements in Beirut and 1 marginalized community in Lebanon. Parenting program for early childhood with a strong component of school readiness in high vulnerable, high to reach areas. Again, fast forward a few years, we are just now releasing the outcomes of those studies. We are in the process of publishing the randomized trial outcomes paper, the process evaluation to tell the community what were the challenges that we faced as researchers and as implementers in these contexts, and other supplemental analyses that can come, not even from the trial perspective, but just understanding the variables of the context. What we're going to do now is tell you how this happens in real life, how us here at Yale designing these studies, how do we engage with practitioners across the globe and to really strengthen the programming and expand the ECD and peace building agenda in a global context. So now Suna is going to tell us what this exercise has meant for them as one of the leading agencies in the world for programming and one of, again, the ones who have propelled this narrative and agenda of peace building through ECD.
Thank you, Angie. It's very humbling to be here. I'd like to begin by introducing ACEV very briefly. So we are an agency working to reduce disparities and address inequalities. And to this end, we develop 2-generation early childhood development models, where MOSEP is the model where the mother was trained as an early childhood educator to provide the first education and early enrichment at home to her child, which became known as the mother-child education, the MOSEP model. And all of ACEV's later on programs are derivatives of this model where the iterations have been developed, and we are disseminating these programs through a nationwide training network of trainers of network of trainers. So let me tell you how the Lebanon Trial came about. There was this idea of early childhood through peace building, and as we were thinking of this idea, we were not really sure what it really meant. And Arab Resource Collective, ARC, in Lebanon, our local partner, was already implementing the program. Our hypothesis on whether ECD would be related to peace building was just on an idea phase. And during that time, the question interested our Yale colleagues who were already working on pathways to peace. And they wanted to see if the theories could actually prove our work and could be proved right. So it turned into a solid RCT, which was truly inspired from a design perspective. Now that the trial is out and it's completed, we will have academic papers showing results. So the idea turned into a grounded academic work. Now, what does this mean for an organization like ACEV? Most importantly, this work has helped us to hone our narrative, and it really has enabled us to talk about this within a more ecological framework. Our language has changed. It has helped us, and not just ACEV, but other organizations in our network for advocacy around early childhood for peace building. And on a concrete level, I can actually tell you 4 things. So soon we will be capitalizing on communications and the space our network provides. In the coming months, we will have a series of webinars, which is a very cost-effective way of communication and utilizing our network. And this will provide ACEV with evidence-based information going forward, informing our programmatic and implementation decisions. So, because as we see what has really worked in Lebanon and what didn't, we're able to better define the dimensions fundamental to understanding implementation processes, factors for improving scaled implementation of interventions. Because there is great buy-in for MOSEP, so we have to discuss the role of context, a conflict refugee zone, in adapting and implementing MOSEP, the importance of standardized reporting of implementation research. We have to discuss the importance of capacity building and supervising program trainers, which is directly linked to how program fidelity is affected and how program quality can be improved. Secondly, very soon, together with colleagues, we're planning on going back to Lebanon and meet with the community, give back to the families, share the results with them, bring back the community leaders and the NGO directors, get their ideas. Thirdly, we're thinking about now how can this program implementation and the research can impact policies? How can we turn this into a policy tool so that the Lebanon government can integrate this into an intervention into their existing systems? And lastly, this current research, which has opened up the way for new research to be carried out. We know RCTs can be very challenging, especially in these settings, but it was feasible and important to strengthen programs and positively impact families. So now, with our Yale colleagues, we're starting to do a new RCT in Saudi Arabia, where MOSEP has been implemented for the last couple of years. So we've actually come a full circle. Thank you.
Suna has talked about how research from Yale, together with activities in Turkey, helped ACEV to produce pioneering work and bring the topic of early childhood development for peace building on the table. And actually UNICEF was also observing with great interest what was happening in Turkey and later in Lebanon. Knowledge program, I would like to talk a little bit about this, how this has affected UNICEF's work and how UNICEF is trying to give back to the ECD for peace building community. Peace building is traditionally not a field where educators and early childhood development specialists make a career. It is about economic governance, security, elections, economic reform, but not about early childhood development and not about social services. But in 2012, there was a shift and there was a recognition that the way we administer social services can create tension, can create trust. And of course, we would never ever claim that early childhood development or education or health services alone are the panacea for sustaining peace. But we are saying it can make quite a significant contribution, because what people want is safety, protection for their children, for their relative. They want to have access to services, and they want to live a peaceful life. Early childhood development, or the book from the Pathways to Peace book, was a super important book for us here at UNICEF to basically summarize this research evidence and first of all, teach ourselves. UNICEF is a huge organization. When you come to senior management and say, we believe that early childhood development contributes to peace building, the question is, excuse me? And what is the evidence? And it is books like Pathways for Peace, which is a very impressive book, where we were able to basically make an argument for the importance of a culture of peace, where we are coming across not by just sharing an opinion, but by actually sharing a concept which is important for children. Children are the ones who lose most from war, have the most to gain from peace. We need to provide the evidence. After we have been able to persuade our colleagues in UNICEF and our colleagues, not just at headquarters, but in the field, the next point is we want to bring this topic to the table of our partners, and that is communities, NGOs, but most importantly, governments. And they also ask the question, ECD for peace? Excuse me? Why peace? We have peace here. Why are you even talking about peace? And what we need are briefs like the one which Chelsea showed you and which was lying outside. When a representative leaves in the morning to the ministry, for the 20-30 minutes he is stuck in the traffic jam. He reads through a brief of 2 or 3 pages with really, really good evidence so that he has the power of the argument, the power of science, as was argued before, in order when he walks into the office of the minister, and the minister says, is this really true? We can confirm, yes, it is. And UNICEF has in the last 5 years slowly begun to leverage the social services which we are facilitating, education, health, nutrition, water and hygiene, not only for the development and the protection of children, but also to transform relationships and to contribute to the mitigation of drivers of conflict. Of course it is difficult. Of course it is only a contribution, but it is a contribution which should not be ignored. And now we are trying to generate evidence, and what we have on the ECPC website and also on the Learning for Peace website, we have a lot of case studies through which we can demonstrate the relevance of social services for peace building, and we are now able to give back. One way to give back is the case study this morning which Pia mentioned about Ivory Coast, but there are other case studies from Northern Ireland, or the colleagues who reported this morning, Vietnam, the government of Vietnam welcoming the concept of social cohesion, putting it into their national framework, opening the door to begin work in tribal areas where there are tensions between minority and majority communities, and trying to test the idea of ECD to bring closer cohesion between communities. That is the way the knowledge brokering has benefited us. So thank you, ECPC, for producing knowledge which inspires us, and thank you, UNICEF, for implementing it on the ground so that we can confirm it and confirm this back to platforms such as ECPC. Thank you.